Let's go ahead and create another element selector. Again, the great advantage of creating an element selector means anytime that element appears within the page, it'll take on those styling characteristics that you set up in the Properties panel. Of course, there's more to it than that when you get into the cascade and you get into more complicated selectors in terms of specificity on how these properties will be applied to certain elements. But if you strip all that away and just look at this at its most basic level, if you create an element selector, anytime that element appears within the page, it will appear the way that you asked it to appear here inside the CSS Designer. So in the last movie, what we did is we redefined the appearance of the H1 element, meaning anytime we use an H1, it will appear this way. We want to do the same thing for these H2 elements. If you select flowing water in the tag selector, you can see that it is in fact an H2. Same thing with forest. Same thing with plains and prairies. And if you scroll down, we also have deserts. That too is an H2. So if we go ahead and create an H2 selector, we're going to go ahead and immediately change the appearance of all of these headings. So again, what we want to do is make sure that the H2 tag is selected down here in the tag selector. Again, that's not necessary, but it's helpful if you don't know HTML. You can then come over to the CSS Designer, make sure that the style source is selected. We want to go ahead and create a new selector, so we're going to go ahead and click the plus sign. It'll create that descendant selector, which we don't want, so we're going to go ahead and remove body. And now we just have the H2 element here for the selector. Once you press enter, you can go ahead and apply some properties. Let's move to the text category. We'll do something basic here. We'll change the color. If you want to change the font family, you can do that as well. I'll go ahead and set it to the same font family that we used for the H1. And you can also control the size. Now, we're going to talk about font size in much greater detail a little bit later on. Notice that there's several different types of measurements that you can use. Most popular, of course, will be ems and percent values and also pixel values. You typically won't use points. It's more of a print measurement. To keep things simple right now, I'll go ahead and select pixels, and then I'll go ahead and type in a value of 20. When you tab away from it, you'll see that value applied to all of these H2s. Now, you can easily adjust this by clicking and dragging over the number. You'll get a scrubby slider. But of course, you can also click to get a blinking cursor so you can type in a value as well. So you have a lot of control here inside the CSS Designer. Of course, you have all the options that you had available for the H1. In fact, you have all the options for all of these categories. But for right now, we just want to focus on text. If you did want a drop shadow, you do have that ability. You can go ahead and select a color. I'll choose a light gray. Then you can go ahead and set an offset for the horizontal and vertical shadow. Now, you'll notice you're not seeing that inside the design view, and that's because it has to be rendered by a web browser or the internal WebKit rendering engine. And we can view that here in Dreamweaver by clicking the Live button. Now we can see the drop shadow. And again, this is all generated by CSS3. Without using CSS3, the only way to create text like this would be to create an image. So there's a lot more capability here with CSS3. But nevertheless, here's our second element selector. Now, in the next movie, we're going to go ahead and take a look at how we can go about creating a different type of selector. We're going to be taking a look at how we can work with a group selector.